Today, we look into one of the most imaginative screenplays of the awards season. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insight into the creative process of storytelling. Folks, I cannot tell you how psyched I was to have co-writer Sir Christopher Hampton and co-writer director Florian Zeller with me to discuss their latest film, The Father. Now, The Father has been Oscar nominated for screenplay, amongst other nominations that are all rightly deserved. And there's just so much to unpack about it because it's so rare to see happen on screen what they did. And to think that this started as a play, I can't imagine what this would have looked like live. It would have been a trip. But it just has a great look about it in the film. As you know, the story is about someone suffering dementia. But what's so interesting about it, as we're going to talk about, is that we see that experience from the point of view of the sufferer, which is just very rare and very difficult to do as well. Without a doubt, Florian and Sir Christopher were so forthcoming about their creative process and what it took to make this unique film that I know you'll dig this episode. Of course, Florian and Sir Christopher have also been in the series recently because they were there for the 13th annual Screenwriting Nominees panel. We had 14 writers representing 8 out of the 10 Oscar-nominated screenplays, and that was one heck of a chat as well. And speaking of other things to dig, we recently published the Backstory Magazine Oscar issue. That's right, issue number 43, and it is packed with content. I'm so proud of this issue. I'm so proud of my team that made it possible, and to all the artists that made it possible by being so generous with their time. And you could see the table of contents over at backstory.net. And when it comes to The Father and its representation in there, not only did we talk to Sir Christopher and Florian in the magazine as well, but we also talked to the editor of The Father. And for the way that this film is put together, that's no small task there as well, because he's also been Oscar nominated. So that was great. But there is so much to explore in this issue. So I hope you look at the table of contents over at backstory.net. And I hope you consider becoming a subscriber. You know, you could read us on a desktop or laptop, or via our iPad app entitled Backstory. If you've never read us before, I hope you'll check out our free issue and get a sense of who we are and what we do. And if you want to become a subscriber, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5. And you could use it in your checkout cart over at backstory.net, and it'll save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. And not only will it give you access to new content we produce, it'll also give you access to our archive as well, which we are continuing to build. But look, I'm so proud of this Oscars issue. If you dig this podcast, I really hope you go check it out because I know you'll dig it as well. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our chat with co-writer director Florian Zeller and co-writer Sir Christopher Hampton to discuss their Oscar-nominated screenplay for The Father. Okay, Florian, Christopher, it's great to see you guys again. How's it going today?
Good. Thank you very much.
All right, good. Well, so
just was able to have lunch with someone for the first time this year.
That's great. That's great. I love the way that
in London.
Yeah, I love the way that things are slowly starting to get back to normal, little by little. You know, we're gonna kind of give our listeners a baseline, and I think one thing to start for both of you, Florian and Christopher, is: did you study writing? Tell us about your past. Florian, starting with you.
No, I didn't study writing. I'm French, as you can hear, and the thing is that in France, we are not very familiar with the idea of learning how to write. There is no such a thing of writing lesson. You know, you cannot go to university and to learn how to write. It doesn't exist.
Interesting.
And so when I was younger, I started writing novels, and then I discovered theater, and it became something very important, like a passion of my life. And in the last 15 years, I spent all my nights and all my days going to theater, writing theater, experiencing theaters. And so this is where I come from, theater.
So your experience was in the field. Christopher, did you study?
No, because, although we do have universities and courses here, I'm old enough to have preceded those courses. So I never had anything like that. And I think actually, my university or my where I learned was reading other people's work. I think. For example, when I was first hired to write a screenplay based on my first play, I I don't think I'd ever read a screenplay before. So I went to the bookshop and I found a book called 5 Screenplays by Harold Pinter.
Oh, wow.
And they were all adaptations. They were all based on novels. So I bought the 5 novels, and then I read the 5 novels, and then I read what Pinter had done. And that was really my education as a screenwriter.
That is an excellent way to go. Christopher, kind of breaking in, one of your first film credits was an adaptation of Ibsen's A Dollhouse, which starred Anthony Hopkins in 1973.
That's
what
right.
do you remember about that as your first filmic experience, and how much you got to know Hopkins?
Well, it was brilliant. Claire Bloom, who played Nora in A Doll's House, had done it in the theatre. I'd adapted it for the theatre, and so I knew her. And I only knew Anthony because he was a sort of drinking companion of an actor I knew very well called Victor Henry. And in fact, they were roommates, I think, at one time. And so, I kind of arrived on the set knowing about Anthony without necessarily knowing him very well. And it was very exciting was to be there. And the very first day I was on the set turned out to be it was the great old English actor called Ralph Richardson, and he was 70 on that day. I happened to turn up at the studio, and they'd all planned a little surprise for him at lunchtime, and they came out with a cake, and there were lots of press there and everything, and so he wasn't very happy about this, and he kind of endured it for about 5 minutes, and then he ducked out and said to me, "Oh, this is all very boring, dear boy. Come and have lunch." So I'd never met him before, so I went off and had lunch with him, and we had only just sat down at the table when somebody loomed with a bottle of champagne, and it was Laurence Olivier, who I'd also never met before.
Wow.
It was a good day.
I was about 25. It was my first day on the set.
Wow.
So it was pretty exciting. I remember, what I most remember about that film was that the producer said to me when I was hired, well, it's a very low budget, so we can only have 2 exteriors. And I was halfway through writing it, and he rang up and said, "No, I'm sorry, we can only have 1 exterior." So if you see the film, it has a glorious Norwegian exterior over the credit titles at the beginning, and then you're in the studio for the rest of the film.
That's crazy. Florian, when we did our Oscar panel, and you kind of mentioned that you hadn't been happy with the previous filmic adaptations of your own plays. Obviously you were more involved on this one, and it was a complete success. But what do you think was a missing ingredient, maybe, or something that was misinterpreted about your work in its previous translation to the screen that you were happy to correct for this?
It's hard to tell. What you can feel is that the result is not good. And in a way, it was something important to me because it helped me to be more aware of what I really didn't want. Sometimes it's a way to learn, to be in places where you're not happy, and to be more precise about what you want and what you do not want. And maybe there has been an adaptation of The Father previously named Floride, and it's very far from the play itself. So it was I was disappointed because I didn't recognize what was, I think, interesting in The Father, which is the narrative, the way to put the audience in this subjective position. But in a way, it allowed me to make another film, because it was so far from my play that it left a room for me to make the film that should have been done, I think, based on the play.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because a lot of people don't realize that this is kind of the second filmic version of The Father, basically.
Yeah, but
in a way.
Yeah, only in a way, because I think that in the end, I think only one line is left from the play in the script of Floride, and also the originality of The Father is precisely the way that story is told. This is not the story itself.
Right.
And for many reasons, the director and the producers of that first film, they made the decision to tell the story in a more linear way. So it was completely different, and there is nothing to do. If you were not aware that it's based on my play, you couldn't tell. Really, you couldn't.
Christopher, you were saying that you went to lunch earlier, and just a general question for both of you. The pandemic really has ravaged the entertainment industry. Governments around the world, in my opinion, did not look after the entertainment industry at all, even though it has been a tourist attraction and moneymaker, both theater and film. And people are worried. Here in Los Angeles this week, there was, the ArcLight Cinemas are saying that they're closing, which is owned by Pacific Theaters. And people are hopeful that something will happen. Somebody will buy the building. Somebody will maintain it. And it just harkened me back. I have a degree in both theater and film. So I'd studied theater history. And I know you both are familiar with theater history as well. And throughout history of theater, there have been long-term quarantines. There have been long-term wars that have shut down theaters as well as film production and movie theaters as well. How do you guys see theater and film returning as we're coming out of this?
I would say I think history proves that when these events do happen and these theaters go dark for a few years, when they come back, people are really, really enthusiastic about the fact that they've come. People can't. I feel, I may be proved wrong, but I feel that people will go back to the theatre and the cinema in even greater numbers than they went before. And I'm not usually known to be an optimist, but I do I do feel that way. I do feel that way. I think it's really been however, such a destructive and difficult year for so many people in our industry that how many people have been sort of permanently damaged by it is a real worry.
Florian, same to you?
Yes, I do feel the same, sincerely, that people will be here to go back to theater. And this is something that we can already feel in some places, in some countries where, a theater are reopened. Because I feel that we all experience the fact that we are missing this experience of sharing a moment, of sharing a room, of sharing an emotional experience with people you do not know. And it's something very specific. And sometimes I told myself I was not aware of that experience before I missed it. And now I'm more aware of what are the stakes of going into a theater. Going into a movie theater. It's about, sharing something with people you do not know. They are strangers. And suddenly you realize that they are not strangers anymore just because you shared an emotional experience. And that's something that is really powerful, I would say, just to remember that we are all the same. We have the same fears, the same experience in a way, meaning that we are experiencing fraternity thanks to art.
And historically, the revivals that come after those periods of closure, even political closure as well in British theater, which happened a bunch of times, those have been really great resurgences. So I'm hopeful as well. All right, I have to geek out for a second here because we're with living legend Christopher. I just want to ask 3 quick questions for you. Going back into your past, I've always loved Dangerous Liaisons. You were Oscar nominated for it. What was your biggest lesson that you learned on that film? I know we could do an entire episode on it, but just if you were to boil it down, what was your biggest lesson as a writer that you learned on that film that maybe informed your creative process going forward, or was some problem solving?
Well, the biggest lesson that I had, luckily, going into it was that I had worked for a whole year with David Lean on a version of Joseph Conrad's Nostromo, which unfortunately was never made.
Wow.
But I really did learn an enormous amount from him. And the reason that Dangerous Liaison, I guess, was a much better script than I'd ever written before was that I was able to use all those lessons that he taught me. And actually it was all a bit of a flurry, Dangerous Liaison, because if you recall, Milos Forman had announced that he was making a film on the same subject, which was eventually called Vaman. So we were in a race. So Lorimar, who was the now defunct company that was funding Liaison, said, "Look, we just have to get out first because we can't. There's a 600-pound gorilla called Milos Forman, and we need to get out in front of him." And so I actually wrote the script in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Blood coming out of my ears, and then there was at least two or 3 months before I could persuade them to take on Stephen Frears, because the script kept going to every fancy director, every good director you can think of, and they would go a certain way down the line, and then Milos would phone them, so they would withdraw. So Louis Malle, who I worked with a bit, who really wanted to do it, he called me up one day, and I went round to his apartment in New York, and he said, "Look, I can't. Milos is my neighbor and he's my friend, and I can't. He doesn't want me to do this." So that was it. All of this was tremendously lucky, because it meant that I was able to persuade them to take Stephen Frears, who I'd worked with in television, but was not generally known as a film director of large scale films, had never made an American film before. So it all worked out perfectly as it happened.
That's great. That's a great story. I had two more quick questions. I have never had a chance to actually see it, but I've always loved it. You wrote the book and lyrics for Sunset Boulevard, the musical, which you received two Tony Awards for, musical book and score. What did you learn about adapting Charles Brackett, Billy Wilder, and D.M. Marshman's Jr.'s film, the classic, with your co-writer, Don Black?
Billy Wilder, who actually liked the show very much and came to see it more than once, 2 or 3 times. The first time he saw it, he delighted us by saying to us, "You boys are very clever. You didn't change anything." And in fact, I love the film so much that what I was just trying to do it was like a translation. I was trying to translate it into theatre terms. It was also very, very exhilarating to do, because I had never done a musical before. And so it always, when you do something for the first time, it's there's a sort of added buzz and pleasure. So it was just great doing it.
I hope it's revived and I get a chance to see it on the stage someday soon. Last question, and I know you could go on forever about this, but it's just so fascinating because you always kind of drop little hints, and you even did just a second ago. And then we're going to fully get into The Father, I promise. You just have, because of your varied, diverse history of working with different filmmakers, you have, what sounds like a box full of these passion projects that never made it. And I would just love to hear a few, just a few of your maybe top 3 or 4 that you still think would make good films today. And in Backstory Magazine, my magazine, we sometimes publish those screenplays and do deep dives in unproduced lost treasures. So I'm definitely going to reach out to you about doing an article with you as well.
Fine. Well,
it's a great question, by the way.
I think the script that I felt most strongly about was an adaptation of a book by Neil Sheehan, called a book about the Vietnam War, called A Bright Shining Lie, which I was on for about 2 years with Warner Brothers, and I think the resulting script was really almost the work in film that I'm most proud of. And I did get my publisher's favor to publish it, which was great. But things just, how things fall downstairs when you're least expecting it. And suddenly Warner Brothers, who had just, I think, acquired HBO, decided that it should be done for television and it should be done as an HBO special. So they asked me to because it was an enormous epic film, kind of a 3-hour, like a kind of Vietnamese Lawrence of Arabia, really.
Wow.
It was a huge film. And they said, "Can you adjust it?" And I said, "Honestly, no, I can't, because I've put so much into it. I can't see how to." So they, rather like I've just described with Dangerous Liaison, they got a writer-director in who wrote a new script in 8 weeks and was on shooting. And needless to say, the result was not what I what I would have hoped for, and I took my name off it.
Interesting.
But it was very, yeah. That was a big blow. Another project I have hopes of was an autobiographical screenplay about my childhood in Egypt, which we were getting ready to shoot, which I was going to direct in Egypt at the time of the Arab Spring in 2011, where it suddenly became impossible to make a film in Egypt.
Right. What was the title?
It's called White Chameleon.
Do you think there's a chance it might get revived?
Well, I was in. Yes, I went to Egypt. This is my last trip abroad. I went to Egypt a few months ago and started to talk to them again. And I think there's now a possibility that we might be able to make the film. So.
Excellent. All right, we're getting fully into The Father, and hopefully Christopher will get you in Backstory Magazine to get further into detail on one of these projects. But Florian, the most boring question for you, we just got to get it out of the way. Please briefly explain your trilogy, your family trilogy, of which The Father is a part of, these plays, and what gave you the inspiration to write The Father.
Yeah, so I'm a playwright, and I wrote 3 plays that are part of the same trilogy named The Father, The Mother, and The Son. I started with The Mother more than 10 years ago, but I was not aware that it would become a trilogy. And then I wrote The Father and then The Son. And there is no direct connections between those plays. I mean, it's not the continuation of the story of something like that. There are different characters, different stories. Maybe the only connections between those plays is that this is about, mental health, I would say. The Mother is the story of a woman who is going through a depressing period when her children are about to leave the house, and The Son is about a 17 years old boy going through a difficult moment as well. And so coming back to the Father, I wrote The Father 8 years ago, and it was at the beginning, I think, a play thanks to which I was trying to explore my personal story. It's about dementia in a way. It's the story of a man losing his bearings. And at that time, I remember that I was thinking a lot of my grandmother. I've been raised by my grandmother, and she was like my mother. And she started to suffer from dementia when I was 15, and she was really dear to me. So this experience had a strong impact on me, and I knew a bit what it was to go through this painful process. But I also knew that I was not the only one, and that unfortunately everyone is related to this painful issue, meaning that everyone has a grandmother, or everyone has a father, or everyone has or will have to deal with this dilemma. So it was not about trying to tell my own story, because I think it's not enough. It was more about trying to share emotions. But I was not certain that the audience would be open to such an emotional journey. And so I was nervous about the play being on stage. And then I was really profoundly moved, I have to say, to discover the response of the audience. And I realized that there was something cathartic about it, meaning that people were sharing their own stories after every performance. And this is really when I made the decision to make a film based on this. And also because, so the narrative of the plays is to put the audience as if they were in the main character's head. And I had the intuition that the cinema, thanks to its language, could turn this experience into something even more immersive, even more subjective, even more disturbing. And this is why I really wanted to explore this possibility of making a film.
It really is disturbing. I've seen people, referring to it as the horror film that you didn't know was a horror film, because there is something horrific about it. If you were to make this on your own, I'm sure you would have been just fine. But if you were to pick any partner in the world, how did you pick Christopher as your partner? Chris, how did you get involved? Because the two of you joining forces, I think, is also really something that made this film special.
Well, I'm his translator. I saw The Father when it was on in Paris, and that was when we actually at the theater that evening was the first time we met. I was so bowled over by the play, and it's extraordinary sort of combination. I've said this before. It's a very, very original piece, but it's also very simple. This is a very rare combination. And so I was very, very struck by it. And I just said, I'd like to translate it. And then we, embarked on quite a long adventure in getting the play on in London, because there was quite a lot of resistance, really, I think, to we started in a small studio theatre out of town. And it was very well received, but people had, doubts about whether it was something that could be shown in a commercial theatre, or that audiences.
You're right, because the subject matter is so difficult. I was actually terrified during the early part of the awards season that it was going to be lost, to be honest, because it's just a subject matter that, especially the people that know about it by having firsthand experiences through friends and family members, one of the last things they want to do when they seek entertainment is to re-enter that sphere. And I was actually worried that maybe you guys would miss a nomination, but at the same time, I was like, no, the script's too brilliant. The idea is too brilliant. It's rare that you get inside the head of somebody suffering from dementia. And I was so glad that you guys ended up with your 6 Oscar nominations. And that's interesting to hear that even on the stage with such meaty roles that you guys had trouble early on.
I remember saying to the producer, look, all I can say is that this play has had better reviews from the critics than any piece I've ever been involved with. How can you imagine that it won't be appealing to a large audience? Because we haven't had one review that hasn't responded to the power of the play. And of course, as you say, it's a tough subject, but those people, I think those people who have been through this sort of experience will I hope receive some sort of, as Florian said, some sort of catharsis from it.
And I think there's something else also. There's the theme, dementia, that could be difficult to deal with, but also it could, from the outside, it could look like a film you have already seen. If I heard for the very first time, there is a movie about dementia and Anthony Hopkins is very moving in it, I would feel as if I had already seen it, and because it looks like a story we already know. We know where we are. We know where we are going. It's supposed to be moving. And I think this is not what is The Father. The Father is something else. It's not only the story. It's the experience, again, of what it could mean to lose everything, including your own bearings as a viewer. And I think that the narrative, the way it is told, the structure is more original than what you could expect when you just hear that it's about dementia. So the danger could be also to feel like there are some movies you feel like you already seen them before you have actually seen them. You see what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great example. And I'm sure some people thought that, but luckily the star power of Anthony Hopkins drew people to it. And his performance is, extraordinary. And Olivia Colman's great too. Everybody in the film is great. And we'll get to the actors in a second. But, I just want to talk about your creative habit for a second for both of you. When you're sitting down to write, how important is outlining to your process? Florian, starting with you. Just when you're sitting down to write either a new project or an adaptation, how important is outlining to your process?
I have to say it depends. Every time is different. Every writing adventure is new and different. Sometimes I am writing without knowing where it goes, and writing is like dreaming in a way, meaning that it's only at the end of the dream that you're in a position where you can look back and understand what it was about. And most of the time I try to do it like that, being as aware, as unaware as possible, just to be here and to see what could appear, and it's a way to be connected also with your subconscious and suddenly to be surprised by what was happening. And in a way, it's as if I was putting myself, as if I was in the audience, attending to something I do not know yet. and being sometimes surprised. And for example, I really remember about the father, the way it appeared to me. So it was the story of this man talking with his daughter, and it was clear, no doubt about what it is about. And suddenly the same daughter was supposed to come by in the apartment. And I remember thinking, and what if it was another actress? And I was surprised, as if I was in the audience. And I was like, oh, what would happen? And if I wanted to know more about that situation, I just had to write new lines to understand or to hear what they had to say. So I was really in this position, discovering what could happen. And this is the position I think is the most exciting, because you haven't planned anything, and so everything could happen. But because I'm a very obsessional person, I come back and back and back. So to me, to write is not only writing, it's rewriting a lot. So I do something and I come back, I do something, and so that's coherent with the way I write. Because to me, writing it's also a lot about building a structure. This is what I'm very excited with, and so this is how I write. Right.
That's great. I was going to ask about the new actor appearing in the movie later, but that totally makes sense that it just came to you in that state. Christopher, how important is outlining to your process?
Well, it's I'm just a completely different sort of writer to in the way that I prepare, I suppose. What I like is to have I need to know what's going to happen at the end. I need to be going towards an end, and I need to have a loose structure. Nothing too specific, because then if it's too specific, you lose the possibility of surprising yourself in the way that Florian just described. But I don't think I would ever surprise myself in the way that he just described, because I would be too organized in advance.
Yeah, but I share with you the idea that most of the time, even when I do not know anything, there is something that I know is the destination, the emotion I want to lead to, or I want to catch. And the writing is a way to achieve or to approach this emotion. And for the father, for example, I was unaware of the journey, but I had that intuition that it had to lead to that moment when the main character would cry for help, as if it was.
And we'll get there because we're still in the non-spoiler section, but I know which moment you're talking about. Please continue.
Yeah. So I share that with you, Christopher, that just to have in mind the destination is a way to go to the journey without being lost.
And for both of you, again, about your creative habit, when you sit down to write, do you give yourself a page count that you want to hit each day? Or do you have a certain amount of hours that you just want to spend writing? Christopher, starting with you.
Well, no, it's just a certain amount of hours. I just have observed, it's an observable phenomenon that as the script goes on, the page count gets larger. I also have a sort of superstition that because I prepared fairly carefully, I like to write fast, because I just feel that the energy that you put into the writing somehow communicates itself at the other end. So it's like I start quite slowly and quite carefully, and then gather speed until. There's one particular play that I wrote where I actually kind of collapsed at the end of it because I'd been writing for 72 hours straight to get it finished. And you get over. It takes you over in some extraordinary way. Just as Florian said, you're dependent on the play telling you what it's about. You don't really know what it's about when you start.
Florian, do you like to give yourself a page count to hit or a certain amount of hours to write each day?
No, I think I have a discipline, but my discipline is to force myself to stop writing. Otherwise, I would go on all the time, The most difficult for me is to stop. And I feel like I'm quite quick to write as well. And when it's difficult, it means that it's not good. To me, at least, when it goes easily, it's always the sign that it works in a way. And so it's a good sign when you are not, when there is something that doesn't work, you don't find the situation, how to deal with it, how to find a solution. It's most of the time it's because it's not good. Not the moment you're dealing with, but sometime 2 scenes before. I mean, it doesn't work. So to me, the greatest moment is when it's very easy, and when you just try to write as fast as the characters are talking, as if, again, you are just hearing what they are saying.
Well, and that brings me to my next question. What do you do when you get writer's block, for both of you, if you get it? Some writers get it, some writers don't. What do you do if you get writer's block?
Oh, you panic. I mean, I had, but it's a long time since that happened, actually, because you get into patterns of discipline. I mean, I remember sometime in about 10 years into my career, I suppose it was, I just couldn't think of what to do next. And there were 6 horrible months when I just couldn't work. And you just have to, I suppose, live through that. But it's touch wood. It's never happened again. So I don't really fear it now, because I always feel that, the important thing is to sit down and do the work. If the work's not good, you can throw it away and start again tomorrow. But it's no good sitting around waiting for inspiration, thinking, what am I going to do next, and panicking. It just gets worse if you do that.
Florian?
Yes, I'm very familiar with the anxiety of not writing and not finding a way to be connected with the inspiration. And I guess I'm trying to learn how to deal with that anxiety, and to understand that it's not a big deal. It happened. It will happen again. And to accept also that sometimes you're not good. Sometimes it's harder. Sometimes what you're doing is not that interesting, and that's okay. You have to accept that sometimes you're not good, and you can, take a pause and have a walk and come back and work. I mean, the best answer to the anxiety is always the work.
Yeah, and that's something I hear a lot. Now, here's the $1 million question. There's no one way to write, and everybody has different processes. So I love asking this. How do you know when you're done? And it sounds like a silly question, but it's actually real, in which, especially writers who rewrite their work and are in a state of constantly rewriting, there is a sense of self-doubt on a certain basic level. And it seems like a lot of writers that I've talked to collate that when they give it to, a trusted friend or colleague for a read, and they're at a point where they're really not getting notes back anymore, or the notes are just tiny, that's how they collate when they're done. How do you know when a project is done and it's ready to go out? And obviously, in particular, The Father, Florian, you did this twice, once as a stage play and then as a screenplay. How did you know when you were at your finished point?
I don't know, but I know it's finished. I mean, it's a very clear sensation. I've never experienced this moment when you are looking for new notes, new feedbacks, and as if it was like an endless process. To me, most of the time, I can't describe it. It's almost like a physical sensation. I know it's done. So I've never had doubt about that.
Christopher.
Likewise, I know when it's. I mean, because I think we both said earlier that we sort of know where we're heading. And what's going to happen at the end of the piece. So when we get there, and it's with a sense of enormous relief, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. It's just wonderful finishing something.
Yeah,
I'm not a great reviser, not really because I don't, because I feel that everything's perfect, but I don't often manage to improve things in my experience. In other words, when I've got to the end, it tends to be finished, and of course in rehearsals you'll learn things, and in previews you'll learn things, but those are all points of detail and things that work and don't work with the actors or with an audience in the room, and those are not fundamental things. And I feel, I used to love Tennessee Williams. I still do. And one of the things that distressed me was reading his biography, how he was susceptible to people telling him what they thought about his plays and how he should change them. And, Elia Kazan saying, "Oh, no, you don't want Big Daddy. You have got to bring Big Daddy back in Act 3, or whatever it is." that seems to me a kind of violation of the individuality of the writer. I mean, if the writer's going to write some stuff that's not so good, that's as much part of his personality as the stuff that is good. I'm not really a great fan of the workshop, should we say?
Why not?
Well,
do you think that it's just too many possibilities, too many cooks in the kitchen?
Yeah, I do. I think, make up your mind who's writing it and let them write it. And I think that, it's not so bad now, I don't think. But in the old days in Hollywood, I think there was the general feeling that if you had 6 writers, it was 6 times as good as having 1 writer.
Right.
And I don't, I really don't agree with that.
Last question before we get into the spoiler section. This is a complicated script, and it was a complicated play. And there's a lot of room for failure on the adaptation of it to the screen. And Florian, this is your directorial debut as a filmmaker. How hard was it for you to assert yourself, to stay in as a director, having this be your first film, which is one hell of a debut, my friend?
Thank you. I was really familiar with the play. I was really familiar with the emotions that I wanted to explore. I think I knew exactly why I wanted to make that film. I knew exactly what film I wanted to make. So I just had to follow that, to be as close as possible to the reasons why I really wanted to make that film in the first place. And I had the chance to work with amazing, actors, and it made things really easier, of course.
What was the budget and schedule?
It was a short schedule. It was slightly more than 5 weeks shooting time.
How many days? I would say 25 days. Was it 25 days?
Something like that, yeah. So it was quite short. And it was a low budget. I think it was $5 million.
Wow. You got so much on the screen, but it's so great. Well, so, all right, podcast listeners in iTunes and Spotify, and people watching this Zoomcast on YouTube, on the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, if you have not yet seen The Father, fix that. You got to go see The Father. You could find it anywhere that you've been watching movies online this entire pandemic. So please go see The Father. We are going to get into the spoilers now. We're going to talk scene-specific stuff. So this is your chance to press pause if you don't want to hear the spoilers yet, and please go see The Father if you haven't seen it already. So, look, this film rightly got 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and including Best Adapted Screenplay. And I'm curious, just from the start, just a basic question: how much time do you think actually progresses in the film? If you were to look at a calendar and give us, it's this many months or this many years, what do you think the film encapsulates as time is concerned?
It's a tricky question because there are several answers to that question. It could be over 2 days. There is a possibility to tell the story over 2 days. And basically there is only one dinner with the chicken. And the day after that dinner with the chicken, there is this carer that is coming to start her work with Anthony. But it had to be also at the same time possible to tell the same story on 3 months' time. And it had both possibilities has to work together, because the idea was to break the logic with time and space at the same time. And it was the whole challenge of that film. And sometimes you have only one sentence or sometimes only one word that force you to change your understanding of the time or the space issues. And for example, you have chicken, and you have to think, so maybe this is the same chicken, this is the same dinner. So I just came back before the dinner. And it's really built that way, so that you have repetitions in the frames, repetitions in the words, repetitions in the lines, so that it's like a circle, but at the same time, it's what is repeated. It's not exactly the same, so that it's like very disturbing, because it looks like hell. It's like a circle, but it's like hell. And it's from the writing, the directing, the editing. In the editing, we use that a lot. For example, so many times we have the same frame exactly, but it's not exactly the same characters or the same actions. in it. It's the same corridor. We are very familiar with the doors, so that you have the feeling that you know where you are, but it's slightly different, so that you are never quite sure of where you are in terms of space and where you are in terms of time.
That's fascinating.
Another way of looking at it is to say that it actually lasts 97 minutes. And it's in the head of the character.
Yeah,
that's interesting as well.
And to me, the moment what was important for in the film for the audience to understand that you can't use your brain in the usual way to understand the time or how the time is built is, that scene with the plastic bag, the blue plastic bag. So you see Anthony in the kitchen, and suddenly he sees some plastic bags, and this is in his kitchen at the beginning of the story. And then 15 minutes later, you have a new apartment, and it's a completely new kitchen. So we have to be in another space, another apartment. And you see Olivia Colman going into that kitchen with the same plastic bags. And she puts the plastic bags on the table in the exact same position. So you're like, so this is the same plastic bags. So that scene is after the first one, because there is a connection between the position of the plastic bags. But on the other hand, it's not the same apartment. So it had to be later. But if it is not the same apartment, it cannot be the same situation. So in just when the juxtaposition of two scenes, you break the coherence of the time and of the space.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a fascinating answer, though. I love it. 97 minutes, 2 days, or 3 months. That's and all three are correct answers. I first saw this at the AFI Fest here in America. They did it online. It was virtual, and I'm watching it, and just right off the bat, I see Olivia Colman return to the room in a different shirt, and the one that we saw her in a second ago, and I'm just sitting there like, wow. I mean, the pandemic's been rough, like there is a literal continuity error that is glaring in this movie. I'm like, I feel so bad. Like I guess it's good that they're putting it out and just toughing through it. And then I realized that really what you're doing for the entire movie, this is not a continuity error. This is like, your own version almost at times of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, in which we are inside a brain that is decaying. And rather than that film having the protagonist run from it, in your film, he's surrounded by it. He's like standing in the middle of a tornado that's circling him, is the way that I almost liken it. And it is a brilliant visual motif. I can't imagine how well it was done on the stage, because it probably was done well. I know some people that have seen the play, but what you did in the film was just extraordinary. There's no other way to describe it, for exactly what you're talking about, using the exact same repetitions in motions and sets. And I'm just curious, how much of that was tracked on the page? Because I could see that something so visual could be a burden to read as well. And by burden, I don't mean something bad, but you just need a lot of description. So were some of those nuances added into a production draft that was different from, say, the draft that you got your actors and your funding from? Because that's a challenge as a writer.
No, it was very clear. What we have done is that we knew that we wanted to use the sets to tell the story. We wanted to use the sets to be part of the narrative. In a way, the set had to be taken as if it was a labyrinth. It was the original idea. And that's the reason why I had to shoot the film in a studio, because as a director in a studio, you can do whatever you want, and you can remove walls, change the proportions, the colors. And I wanted to use that to play with the feeling of disorientation of the audience. And as you remember, at the beginning of the story, we are in Anthony's apartment. There is no doubt about it. We recognize his space, his knickknacks, his pieces of furniture. And step by step, always in the background throughout the film, you have some small changes or small metamorphoses. Sometimes it's almost nothing. It's very subtle, or as subtle as possible, so that you can't tell exactly what happened, but something had happened. And you are, as an audience, in a strange position, because at the same time, you recognize the space and the way to travel into it. But at the same time, you're not quite sure anymore of where you are and where you are not. and you are going through a labyrinth. And so we knew that we wanted to play with that feeling of disorientation, and we had to use the sets to create that. Here, the production design was not about, providing a background for the characters. It was, again, about telling the story. And so in the script, it was written like apartment one, and so living room 1 and bedroom 1, and then apartment 2, living room 2, bedroom 2.
Okay.
So we knew that a change had to be obvious, but how obvious? What was the delicate balance? It was something that I had to define later on during the preparation of the film. So we defined some steps in the evolution of that apartment, from Anthony's apartment to this empty space that was supposed to be the hospital. And this is how we worked.
Did you do that for costume tracking as well? Like talking about the shirts have changed color and stuff like that in the script, in the earlier draft?
Some element came a bit later.
Okay.
So, for example, I started with the end, the destination again. I knew that we had to lead to this hospital corridor. And in my mind, it was like a pale blue corridor. So the pale blue was the destination visually. And so we started with an apartment it happened to be green and yellow and old, but it was not written in the script. What we knew is that we had to have a strong enough atmosphere so that the audience would identify this space as Anthony's space, so that when you make a transformation or a metamorphose, it works on the audience. And then I had to introduce the idea of the blue, and it was done through Olivia's shirt, for example, or the plastic bag we talked about. And step by step, the blue took more and more space to become a bluish atmosphere and to become then the blue hospital.
Exposition for writers is usually seen as a burden. And here it's kind of what the audience craves the most, right? Because his life is such a mystery that we're kind of hanging on any morsel or tidbit that we learn about it, including his daughter, for instance, as an exposition piece that you keep coming back to, that is threaded throughout and finally becomes clear in the hospital when he realizes that, when the audience is able to realize that, he lost his daughter to a car wreck. What were the challenges of exposition for this, Christopher? Or did you see it as freeing because there was less of a responsibility to explain and more of a responsibility to experience?
I think it was a liberation, because exposition is the beast that sits on your shoulder every time, and you're really straining always to try to make it invisible. And here that wasn't really necessary because it was an exposition-less story by design, just as it's the same as the fact that rather than opening it out as you normally do from a play to a film, we were closing it down.
What I think is that the audience is intelligent. This is something I do believe in, and so I don't want to make it too easy for them, And I think that it's very exciting when you are in the audience to have few elements and to have to do something with it, and to find your own path to the meaning. And so I think that when you do not have enough, for example, for the expositions, you cannot be passive, you have to make something meaningful of the few elements that you have.
What was something that changed the most from your adaptation of the play to the screen? Something that was something new that you invented, if there was, that you want to tell us about?
I think that it's for example, when I mentioned how with one frame to break the logic of the time and the space, it was something that was not possible to be done on stage. And also because on stage, basically the play, you have an apartment and things were disappearing to go to the emptiness. And it was like an abstraction concept, but you cannot deal with abstraction on movies, because it has to be realistic. But the temptation when we are talking about a subjective experience or an immersive experience would have been to to use the camera to underline the fact that this is not real, that this is maybe a dream, that this is a perception. And there are so many films that are using, what could be done thanks to the cinema to create this subjective atmosphere. And what was important to us is really not to go in that direction and to deal with reality and with a realistic aesthetic. Everything is shot as if it was reality. And when you have a strong contradiction in the narrative, you have to deal with it. And so you are in a position where you have to, like, as if the film was a puzzle, and you have to play with all that pieces to try to make it work, to try to make it meaningful, to look for the correct combination. And you have to use your brain and to be like, but that scene, is it before or after? And that character, is he lying? Who is he? And to be part of the narrative in a way. And this is something I really wanted. And the only way to achieve that was to use a very realistic aesthetic and to find the correct distance, with what we were shooting, so that you have a room as an audience to make it work. Everything is not explained. You have to do your work.
Christopher, was there anything that was important for you to add to the play in the film adaptation?
A different point. It's always very, very enjoyable to find ways of not giving people what they're going to expect.
Right.
And the example that springs to mind is the Exterminating Angel, L'Ange Exterminateur of Buñuel, where he simply says, okay, there are people at a dinner party and they can't leave the room. Well, there's absolutely no reason they can't leave the room. The door's open, but that's what he says. He says, I'm sorry, people out there in the cinema, my characters cannot leave the room. And in a sense, what we were doing was saying, we can't leave this poor man's head. And anything might happen because it's degenerating in unforeseen and painful ways. But we're just going to say this happens and then this happens and then that happens.
Sure.
And figure it out.
Well, Christopher, you adapted it into English first, and obviously you worked with Florian on the film adaptation. Was there something that was important for you to add that was new in the film adaptation that was not part of the stage play that you want to tell us about?
I think that Florian will be more detailed about this, but I think that the theme of the unknown daughter, his other daughter that he talks about all the time, is actually treated with much more clarity in the film than it is in.
Yes, because we have the image. You're right, of her lying on the bed, which was not in the play.
And then she's played by the actress who plays the carer. So
right.
That adds another layer of complexity on.
Right, and confusion. Right. Yeah. But so that image. Okay, that was the one. I mean, there is like a new feeling for a couple minutes, in there that maybe he's going to be having a good day when the carer, that character we were just talking about, shows up, and it seems like it's a little bit of levity for a story that doesn't have tons of levity, because he's trying to put on his good face at first, but then it declines because that's what the disease does. Talk about just graphing that out emotionally, because it's a fascinating sidestep where you're seeing the daughter going through so much grief as a caregiver that bringing in outside help you're hoping is going to give her relief, but there's no escape.
It's one of my favorite scenes in the film, because apart from anything else, all the actors are on the top of their game and in that particular scene, but also it is very bold, because it's a long scene. It's probably the longest scene in the film, I would think, and it takes Anthony, the character, through the whole gamut of you learn more from that scene about what he must have been like when he was healthy, I think, than from any other scene, and it's constantly surprising, and I think Anthony Hopkins just grabs the possibilities of the scene with both hands.
Yeah, I mean, the scene with Laura was great. Florian, for you, I got a question. I mean, obviously you had such a long past in theater that it makes sense that you would be able to elicit great performances from your actors as a director, and the script has so many great emotional beats that it's absolutely no surprise that top talent was attracted to it. But Florian, what did you learn as a director on this about directing actors? Because these performances really are extraordinary.
Many things. What surprised me the most when I started the process, it started by meeting Anthony with Christopher Hampton. It was to discover a man that was so humble. I mean, insecure as an actor, as every actor, and humble. And being humble for an actor means being here to serve something else than yourself. Being here to serve the story, to serve the emotions, to serve the vision of the director. And I think that from the very beginning, I felt that Anthony would be this kind of actor, giving everything to the story and a little bit more, you know. He has been very generous to the story. So this is what I learned, I think, the fact that humility is the signature of the greatest.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. And the cool news is we just published our Oscars issue number 43, and it is packed with so much great stuff. Not only can you read interviews with Oscar-nominated screenwriters and directors, but we also interview cinematographers and editors. And there's just so much to explore in there. Plus, you could read all the Oscar-nominated screenplays and the contenders. The scripts that were trying to get the Oscar nominations are in there as well. Of course, we have all of our regular content, current cinema pieces, including Godzilla versus Kong, which was a blast to watch, by the way. And, our TV pieces as well. We also publish a Blacklist script in its entirety in each issue, accompanied by an interview with the screenwriter, and that's cool too. So there is so much to explore. And look, if you've never read us, I hope you will test drive us by reading the free issue of Backstory Magazine and see what you think. If you like what you read, I hope you'll consider becoming a subscriber, because your support is crucial now more than ever, and it would mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners subscribe to the magazine. So to sweeten the deal, I'm offering you discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription to Backstory Magazine. It will give you access to any of the new issues that we produce, and also access to our archive. Our archive currently goes to about issue 29, and we just had a technological breakthrough that will make it a little easier to start putting more issues up faster into our archive. So I'm very excited to start speeding up that process a little and letting our archive grow. Look, it really means a lot to me to have my podcast listeners from iTunes and Spotify, and our YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, where all these Zoom casts can be found in their entirety, to support my passion project. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our chat with co-writer-director Florian Zeller and co-writer Sir Christopher Hampton about their Oscar-nominated screenplay for The Father. You got fantastic performances. I guess the only other thing I would ask you, on, since this is your first film, on the stage, there is such a regimen for how actors proceed. There are rehearsals for weeks on end, if not months. And that leads to, the repetition needed for performance. Cinema often doesn't have that. So I'm curious, did you have any sort of a formalized rehearsal before you shot? Or did you kind of let it happen the way it happens on a lot of movies, in which there really isn't? And I don't want to say that the rehearsal is in front of cameras, because it's not, but that, things are roughed out more than they're actually rehearsed like a stage play.
Actually, we didn't rehearse before we shot the film. No, we did not. I could have done it, but I made a decision not to rehearse. Anthony was very happy with that decision, because he's not the kind of director, the kind of actor who wants to talk about the character. Actually, he's not a method actor. He doesn't need to speak about the character. But here, for what I was trying to achieve, I didn't want him to be protected by a fictional character. I wanted him to be almost naked, I wanted him to be Anthony, and in a way, just to be in front of the camera, if it means anything, And so, because I was wondering that, to create or to fake a character could be like too cliche, and we could have had the temptation to imitate an old man with the disease. I remember the very, very first conversation we had was about how an old man with that disease would react or would act. And I was like, maybe it's not the right direction to be too aware of what we were trying to tell as a story. I think that it would have been more powerful to forget that it was about dementia and not to try to imitate something that we have like a preconceived idea about, you see, but just to be yourself in front of the camera with your own energy and power, and suddenly to be overwhelmed by your own emotion. When I say your, I was talking about Anthony's emotions, and in a way the challenge for him was to use his own feeling of mortality in a way, because this is what it is about. And so the fact that we made the decision to name this character Anthony, I think helped us to approach this process, not to be protected by the fiction in a way, just to try to be visceral, raw, simple, and sincere. And it was about trying to achieve the simplicity. And Anthony didn't have to take the complexity of the narrative into account in a way. It was just about trying to be as sincere or as truthful or as powerful as every scene required, without knowing in a way where we were in the process and what it was about. Just to deal with that scene, and that's all.
Tell us about the slap. I mean, it's a really dramatic moment where Paul kind of unleashes on Anthony at first, and he is trying to, there's no solution, right? That's the frustration of all this, and Paul is lashing out verbally at Anthony about how it's destroying their relationship, how Anthony doesn't even know that he's been living with them for a while, and that relationship's deteriorating, and the slap starts. And it's something that you then come back to later with the slap. And I'm just kind of curious about that scene, because it's another real, deeply emotional scene that has an impact on the characters, on the story. And it's just kind of that awful truth moment of a character that they think they're alone, right? We say that we could learn so many things about what people do when they think they're alone. And because they know that, because Paul knows Anthony's not going to really remember the conversation, he's being very direct and kind of mean to him. And that was a really interesting scene that I didn't expect, but had a lot of impact as well.
Yeah, it has to be a cruel and very difficult scene to watch, but also in a way a difficult scene to understand. Meaning that who is the character who is slapping Anthony, and is it really happening or not? I think that to understand completely that scene, we have to go to the very end of the film, when we are clearly in the hospital.
Yes.
And suddenly we see Mark Gatiss, the actor, coming into that room as a nurse. And suddenly we understand that, so this man who was like a stranger in his apartment and turned to be this violent man slapping him, was in fact the nurse. So it was just maybe about, when you are in a hospital in this condition, you could become paranoid, and so many times people like with dementia, when they are alone in a hospital, they have so many fears about being mistreated, So it deals with that feeling, this paranoid feeling. But you have to wait until the very end of that film to understand that probably this is what happened, meaning that the whole story, in a way, was told from that perspective, from the hospital room, in a way. It was like a labyrinth to go to that room, but probably it's the perspective from the story is told. And to speak about how we shot the scene, it was very easy because Mark Gatiss he's such a brilliant actor, but he's even better when he has to do something slightly perverse, with a smile. And he's the best to do that.
Well, I mean, beyond paranoia, it also chronicles elder abuse. which is a real part of care facilities and
Sure.
something that people try and crack down on, I hope more and more. And that's a reality of this landscape as well.
Sure.
So, I mean, the scene just worked on so many different levels. Talk about going to the ending. You're going to get to the hospital, and you just have this crushing ending of Anthony with Catherine, the caregiver. And, he's learned that his daughter has moved to Paris now, and he's really feeling alone. And you're just seeing him decay layer by layer into a childlike position, in a childlike mentality. And it was really beautiful. And I'm just curious about, Florian, the first time you wrote it, and then Christopher, when you joined in for the adaptation as well.
The line, I mean, when I was talking about the destination in the writing, I was mentioning it was really that scene. And not only the scene, but the emotion of that man crying for his mother and saying, "Mommy." What I felt when I wrote that scene was exactly the reason why I wrote the whole play. Also, there's that line that is, to me, the most important line in the script, which is when he's trying to describe what he's going through. He says, "I feel as if I'm losing all my leaves." And what I like about that sentence is that on one hand, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. But on the other hand, we do understand what it means. Exactly. And the whole film is done like that, meaning that, as I said, the film is like a puzzle, and you have to play with all the combination to try to make it work. And the moment comes when there are so many contradictions in the narrative that you have to accept that your brain is not capable to understand everything. And when you do so, you let it go. And when you let it go, in a way, you can understand the whole story on another level, which is a more emotional level. And even though the narrative is sometimes complex or chaotic, even though you're not quite sure in the end of who is who and what happened exactly in reality, in the end, everyone understands exactly what it was about, what were the emotions, and what was the main character's journey. So it had to lead to some very simple and very easy to understand place. And so we do not understand exactly what happened. And at the same time, we understand everything, And I wanted that film to be, in a way, very simple, even though it is complex, to lead to the pure simplicity of the emotion.
It's an absolute beautiful ending. Christopher, anything you want to add? Because you also have the visual of the tree without leaves outside as well.
Yeah, it's not really, because we played about a bit with that final image. I think it's fair to say before we landed on the simplest version of it. But
sorry to interrupt, but what were some of the other variants that you played with?
We played with the idea of evoking in the audience's memory some of the painting that was done by his daughter.
Oh, okay.
And I think that it's talking about the writing. I think it was a great idea in the writing. That was not a great idea on screen.
You're right.
The idea was, you remember the camera is panning at the very end, leaving the two characters going through the window. And I wanted to have this image in the park and to see a young girl dancing or playing in the grass. And suddenly we recognize the painting that we talked a lot during the film. The painting that was supposed to be his daughter's painting. And it happened, it became clear to me that it was, in a way, too, not complicated.
Too unsimple.
Exactly. Unsimple. Or I didn't want to appear trying to be smart or trying to be, have you seen me? Because at that moment, the emotion was supposed to be so powerful. And even me as a director, I had to leave the space and to leave the room to let everyone with his own emotion, and not to be here and to say, "Hello, I'm here. I'm the director." It's a clever idea. So sometimes a good idea is in fact not a good idea.
It's a perfect ending. Editing is the last stage of storytelling. And in Backstory Magazine, we also interviewed Yorgos Lamprinos, your editor. And tell us what surprised you the most about editing. I mean, obviously there's a nonlinear sense to the film, which means that some of the scenes could be modular and moved around in editing if you wanted to, or did they pretty much fall the way they were in the script? Tell us some of the lessons of editing The Father.
Actually, the editing was really following the script. You could believe that we have found some complexity in the structure in the editing room, as it is most of the time. But this time, no, the complexity of the narrative was really done during the writing of the script. It doesn't mean that it was not a challenging work with the editing, and it was a great process thanks to Yorgos Lamprinos, who is, in my opinion, a great editor. But it was about finding the delicate balance, to have enough to make people feel lost without losing them, And so it was a great process, and to try to be as simple as possible and not to be too talkative.
That makes sense. Christopher, anything that you wanted to tell us about that you were surprised by in the edit?
No, I just thought that, I guess, if you'd, strung the scenes that were shot end to end, and the film would probably have been 7 or 8 minutes longer. And the art was in removing exactly the right amount of. It seems to be so perfectly judged in terms of in terms of the weight of each scene, and it's so, one of the most satisfying things about the film is it's where it's repetitious. It's deliberately repetitious. It's never repetitious in an uncertain way. It always knows exactly what it's doing. So I just, I popped in. They were editing in Paris, so I came over a couple of times, and every time it seemed to be getting more and more refined and more precise.
Yorgos was Oscar nominated for what he did, and rightly deserved, because it was seamless. What was your toughest scene? That's our big question as we're wrapping it up here. What was the toughest scene that you had? The scene that you were sweating writing, the scene that you were sweating adapting. Florian, it could be a scene when you were writing the play the first time, or in your translation to film. And how did you creatively rise to the challenge of that tough scene? I
want to mention the last scene, but it was tough mainly to shoot, not to write, I would say.
Okay.
It was a tough scene to shoot, because it was a tough scene to act, I would say, for Anthony. It was the most challenging moments, because, in a way, we knew that if that scene was not as powerful as it should have been, the whole film, in a way, would have been pointless. And again, here, for Anthony, it was about trying to explore something new, even for himself, in a way, and to dare going to this very fragile and vulnerable place with no protection.
And almost with a lullaby too, like becoming childlike.
Yes, exactly. And this is what happened, actually, because, he did some takes and it was brilliant, but it was not exactly what I was expecting or looking for. And so I asked him to do it again. But I was aware that asking him to do it again was not only asking him to do another take. It was about asking him to go again through those very painful emotions, I would say, because it was about, being connected to his own mortality. And suddenly something happened, and he told me afterwards what happened. It was that he remembered a lullaby, as you said, that his mother used to sing to him. And suddenly I saw that, or we saw, because Christopher was there as well, we saw him completely destroyed by this lullaby. And we saw him traveling through time, 70 years back in his past, and re-becoming the child he was crying for his mother. So I think he was not acting, he was not pretending to be that child. Like a miracle, he really became that child for a few seconds, and it was heartbreaking. It was one of the most intense moments of my whole life, to be here and to see that man exploring this outrageous law that, the end of life looks like the beginning of life. And it was really, and then I said cut, and I ran to him, and he took me in his arm, and we knew that it was here.
It was an extraordinary moment. Christopher, what was your toughest scene?
I think that was the scene that we were all most focused on, really. I mean, Anthony said a wonderful thing to me. I think he felt very, very liberated by the part. And he said to me, you know, the great thing is, he said, I'm such an old bugger, I don't have to do any old man acting. So he's old, and this part gave him an opportunity to sort of convey what it means to be old, not only the authority of it and the kind of dignity of it, but also the terrible fears and vulnerability of it. And so there was so, you know, he was so, despite the fact that it was that it's such a tough piece in many ways, he was really happy making this film, and that made us all happy too. We were all very happy. And I've noticed this before, I must say, that if you're working on a piece with very, very grim, dark subjects, everyone's generally in an extremely good mood. It's only when you're making comedies that people are going around with furrowed brow and agonizingly anxious expressions because they don't know whether it's going to be funny or not, or something. But yeah. I don't quite know why this phenomenon exists, but it certainly does.
Wow. Well, that's great. What's next? That's my last question. What are you guys working on next? Christopher first, and then Florian. I know there was an announcement made today about your next project, but Christopher, what can we look forward to next from you?
Well, I had a play in 2019, which is a one-woman play called A German Life, which Maggie Smith did on stage for only 30 performances, taken from a long interview with a 102-year-old woman who had been Joseph Goebbels' secretary. And during lockdown, the puzzle I set myself was how to actually write a screenplay and make a film with only one person in it. And so that's what I've done, and we hope to make the film later on in the year. And also, I'm holding myself available to help Florian, whichever way needs to be helped.
That's great. Florian, what's your next project? I know today there was an announcement with Hugh Jackman and Laura Dern signing on to a project with you.
Yeah, this is the adaptation of The Sun, so the other play I mentioned earlier, and so we work together for the screenplay, and I'm hoping to shoot over the summer.
Okay, so the screenplay is already written?
Yeah.
Did you write it yourself, or did you write it with Christopher, or?
I wrote it in collaboration with Christopher. I mean, Christopher translated the play as well, The Sun, and right. Thanks to him, it was done in London, and we had a great time in London together. So we have this long and great collaboration and friendship. You know.
That's great.
So I'm very excited that if everything goes well, it will be possible to shoot in July.
I hope you do. Look, I absolutely love The Father. Congrats again on your Oscar nomination, all of them, all 6 of them, but also for Best Adapted Screenplay. And thanks for being so generous with your time. Florian and Christopher, it was great to speak with you again.
Thanks you for your time and your questions. It was great.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to co-writer, director Florian Zeller and co-writer Sir Christopher Hampton for being so generous with their time in discussing their Oscar-nominated screenplay for The Father. And folks, if you haven't yet seen The Father, make sure you go out and fix that, because it is just an extraordinary experience to watch. Of course, while you're surfing around online, I also hope you'll check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You know, you could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. And the cool news is we just published issue 43, which is our Oscar issue, and there is so much to explore in there. You could read all of these Oscar-nominated screenplays. You could even read the scripts that were competing to try and get Oscar-nominated. And in our Oscar issue, we interviewed writers, directors, cinematographers, and editors who have been Oscar nominated. So there's so much to explore. You could see our entire table of contents over at backstory.net to take a peek around inside. And look, if you've never read us, you could also read our free issue to test drive us. We put an entire free issue up there for read that you could read at backstory.net or via our iPad app. And if you like what you read, I hope you'll consider subscribing. And if you'd like to, I'm going to give you a discount coupon code that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. The code is SAVE5. That's save and the number 5, all one word, and you could use it in the checkout cart at backstory.net. And don't worry, if you want to read us on an iPad, your login credentials from Backstory will also work on the iPad as well. But look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners from iTunes and Spotify, and of course, the Backstory Magazine YouTube viewers, which is where all of these interviews can be found as Zoomcasts as well. It would mean a lot to me to have you as subscribers supporting my passion project. So thanks for considering. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2021. All rights reserved. Folks, if you want to find me on social media, you could find me as Yo Goldsmith on Twitter. I also run the Backstory_mag account on Twitter. It's the same for Instagram. You could find me as Yo Goldsmith there, or the Backstory_mag account on Instagram. And look, I have a Facebook fan page. I do not update it enough. I'll try and do a little better with that. And look, if you want to email me, you could always write to backstoryletters@gmail.com. I absolutely promise not to get back to you immediately, but I will do my darndest to help. So feel free to write in anytime. And look, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.